Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Vinayak Shedekar. I'm a research scientist here at the Department of Food, Ag, and Biological Engineering at Ohio State. And I want to welcome you all for this webinar on the overhaul drainage workshop on drainage planning, design, installation, and management. I would like to thank Ohio Land Improvement Contractors of America, the OLICA, for their support of this event. And there is definitely more team members that have been involved with the planning of this event. And we'll talk about that at the end of the program. We so everyone is aware, here is the agenda for the day. We have 3 1-hour sessions. Hopefully each session will end with a 5 or 10-minute break towards the end. And in the first session, we have Dr. Larry Brown and Dr. Peggy Kirk Hall. The second session, we have Justin McBride and Bob Clark as speakers. And then the third session today is going to be the speaker panel. And you can see the list of folks that are going to be joining for that panel. So I will be moderating the first session, and we'll have other moderators as we go along in the session 2 and 3. Before we begin, just a few housekeeping things. As most of you are aware, this 3-hour event does have provide the continuing education credits for CCAs and professional engineers. So if you're a CCA, we will have a QR code that you will be able to scan towards when we complete the event. So we'll have some more information coming on that. I got a lot of questions on the event recording. So just wanted to let everyone know that this event is being recorded, and it will be available for anyone who wants to watch it later. So if you have any issues, concerns, questions, feel free to email me. But if you have any questions specific to the topics today, just definitely feel free to ask those questions live here through this webinar. And you have 2 options to ask questions. The preferred option would be that you use the question and answer feature on your Zoom screen. And if you think you cannot, you need to speak up and express something, then definitely raise your hand, and we'll try to make some time available for you and unmute you, and then you can actually ask your questions that way as well. One request to everyone, we are going to try to mute everyone throughout this webinar, so it is not interrupted, but just try to stay muted if you're not the one speaking. With that, we're going to begin session 1. One housekeeping thing for the speakers is that only the speaker that is presenting shall have their video on. Everybody else, just keep your videos turned off. So when this event gets recorded, the videos match with whoever is presenting. So with that, I want to check if first speaker, Dr. Larry Brown, are you ready to present? Larry, you need to unmute yourself first. There you go.
Okay, I can't access my PowerPoint.
Okay.
You go ahead.
So would you like me to go ahead with Peggy for now, and then we can come back to you?
Do that, but I can't leave my screen for some reason tonight.
Okay.
I can't minimize the Zoom screen, but go ahead and I'll figure something out.
Okay, thank you. All right, we're gonna switch the order a little bit because of the first technical difficulty of the day. So um, I want to introduce Dr. Peggy Kirk Hall. She's the field specialist and agriculture and resource law specialist at Ohio State. And Peggy, I'll let you just introduce yourself and give an overview of what your topic is going to be today.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can hear
The
you.
volume good? Good. Well, good morning, everybody. And I guess my assignment this morning is to take a really quick sprint through Ohio's new drainage laws. We only have about 20 minutes to get through this, so I hope I can at least provide some insight into the new laws that are now in place in Ohio in regards to our drainage improvement projects. I'm the director of OSU Extension's Agricultural and Resource Law Program, and I'll provide information on the last slide for how to contact me if you have further questions about the new drainage laws, and some resources as well that I'm developing on this. So let's get going. It's quite an undertaking because, as you can see here, the Drainage Law Revision Task Force that recommended the changes in what is now current law started meeting back in 2013. And I saw that we have some members of that task force on the meeting this morning. We met for several years and we had a charge. We were put together by the County Commissioners Association of Ohio. We had a charge to update the 4 chapters of our petition ditch laws. And so we began that by looking at technical issues that were identified by those who work with the law. We completed a survey. We asked landowners, SWCD, engineers, staff, lawyers, what are problems that you see with the law? And so we wanted to reflect what was currently being practiced out there in our engineer and SWCD offices. Some of the practices didn't align with what these old archaic, some of our oldest laws actually were the drainage laws. And so we wanted to update those and reflect current practices and also remove some of that confusion between the two we have for petition ditches, the engineer process. We tried to align those and make those as similar as possible in regards to timelines and procedures. And we also, because it was an old law, wanted to just improve how it read, how it was organized, to make it more clear for those who would pick up the law and read it. So we did recommend revisions to all 4 chapters of the, and that bill was carried through the legislature last year, passed in December, and the changes became effective March 24th. So let me tell you what it does in regards to our Chapter 940, which is the old 1515 that many of you may still refer to it as, but the Chapter 940 and 6131 drainage projects. These are the changes, highlights within those 2 chapters that are really the heart of the petition improvement. And we did change the language that it's no longer called a ditch, it's called an improvement. But here are the highlights in regards to the soil and water petition improvements. The process was modified, as I said, to align with 6131, and we made a number of changes to timelines and deadlines, and again, tried to make those the same, whether you're going through soil and water or the county engineer. Created a mandatory pre-petition consultation that was occurring in many places, but we made it mandatory that that petitioner had to consult with the district. And we'll see that also over in the county engineer process, have to consult with the engineer before filing that petition. We of a petition and addressed the benefits definition, which has been problematic in the past. We also created much more detailed notice requirements and a new procedure for amending an original petition. We updated the view so that it can be modernized and can, any kind of technology can now be used. It doesn't have to be a physical site visit for the view. And then we also changed sod and seeded strip specifications, the assessment factors for either petition approval or the standards, I mean, for either petition approval or assessment. So those have been clarified, and we added an updated appeals process. Now, obviously I can't go through all of those, and these are just the highlights. There are many other changes, but I want to focus on the ones that I've bolded there because I think for this audience, they may be of highest interest. So that would be in the soil and water process. If we engineer petition projects, these are the highlights of those, and they're very similar between the two. I'm going to, again, focus in on those that you see in bold here and tell you a little bit more about those changes. The main difference between what we did in 940 and what we did over in 6131 is that 6131, as many of you know, has a bond requirement. And so we did address the bonding there. That doesn't exist over in our 940 projects. But otherwise, you can see that the changes, the highlights look very similar. Also note that I've given you here the link to the Ohio Revised Code up here at the top so that you can go directly to it. We have a new and improved online version of the Ohio Revised Code, and very easy to find and read through all of these provisions that I'm going to tell you about here. So as we look at the process, I know this might look a little bit overwhelming. I apologize for that, but this summarizes a 940 petition, the Soil and Water Conservation District petition. I don't have a similar slide for the county, but as you know, there are some slight differences just because of the way that it works through the different levels of government. But you can see here that we tried to organize this in a very pragmatic way from beginning when the petition is filed to the final assessments. And then even beyond that, there would be a right to appeal. But this lays out the process. We tried to make those timelines make sense as to when things had to be done. We tried to align those with how it happens over in the county engineer's office as well. We tried to update notice lines and requirements as well. So you can see the process that a petition will flow through once it is filed with the Board of Supervisors. And I will share this with the material so that you can have this. And I'll also share the county engineer flow chart as well. I'm working on an entire set of materials that you'll have available through the resources provided from this workshop. So there's the process, not major changes in that, really just making sure that that it all makes sense. Now, if we look at some of the major content changes, one issue that we've always had with our petition projects is this understanding of, how do we know whether it will really benefit in order to approve it? And so we added a little bit of flexibility trying to understand the benefits, because the Board of Supervisors or the county commissioners can approve a project if they're sure that it will provide benefits. And so that benefit has been a source of legal challenges. It's been a source of consternation, argument, and a very specific list that you can see here, 1 through 5 states what benefits includes. And so we were very limited to those 5 points in the old law, but we simply added some language that says it's not limited to these factors, however, when we're determining benefits. So benefits still means advantages to land and to owners, to the public, to the state from doing that improvement, but it includes and is not limited to any of these factors that may help us identify and understand what the benefits of a proposed project are. The second change, and this is one that many landowners will want to pay attention to, is in the easements and the sod and seeded strips that come with a project. We limited temporary construction easements to 75 feet. There was no limitation in the old law. And everyone agreed that a project could easily be done within that 75 feet easement for temporary construction purposes. And then we increased the permanent easement. There were a lot of problems with being able to complete maintenance on a 4-foot easement on those sod and seeded strips. And so we increased the sod and seeded strips, and we'll have more of that for drainage purposes as well, not just for maintenance. So it went from 4 feet to 10 feet. The maximum still remains at 15. So from 10 to 15 feet would be the easement for sod and seeded strips. And an additional change that we made is that the entire amount of that sod or seeded strip is to be removed from the taxable value of that property. So some big changes there with our sod and seeded strips. The as far as approval of the petition itself, when it comes before the Board of Supervisors in Soil and Water, the new law changed it a bit and kind of revised some of those approval factors and added language that the Soil and Water Board of Supervisors may approve it if they're reasonably certain that these benefits will outweigh the costs, that it's necessary and conducive to public welfare, that the route and mode will improve water management and development, and will aid lands generally in the area by promoting an economic, environmental, and development of the area. Very similar to what we had, but we cleaned it up a bit, clarified it, and added that language about you may approve it if you're reasonably certain, rather than you have to consider all of these factors. We also allowed the board to dismiss a petition if it found that the cost would be equal to or greater than the benefits that would be derived, that it's not necessary, or that it won't be conducive to the public welfare. So some clear standards there for when the board has the authority to dismiss a petition, and that is all new as well. As far as appeals, there really wasn't a clear process for appealing a rejection or approval of a petition. And so we clarified that, and we also tried to make the two different routes very similar. So within 30 days, an affected owner may appeal. These standards were already over in the county engineer petition process, but now they're added over in soil and water, and you can appeal based on any of these factors or questions. So we've added those now over to soil and water. And I apologize for going so quickly, but really just trying to help you see the highlights, and you can read in more detail if you find something of interest, and I'd be happy to help you with that. Now, when we go over to 6133 is where we are. We're looking at those joint projects that span more than one county. And there were a lot of problems in the past with counties kind of bickering over these projects. So what we did was identify a lead county, so that the lead county is going to basically take the lead on the petition. And we clarified the roles of officials within that lead county for working that petition through the process. So the petition has to be filed with the lead county, whether we're over in 31 or in 940, at 6131 or 940. You have to file it with the lead county, and the lead county is the county in which a majority of that initial length of the improvement will occur. So we look at the original petition, and we look at the length of that improvement, and we look physically at where most of that lies, and that's the county that the petition will be filed in. And those officials in that county will take the lead on handling the petition, but there still will remain a joint board with representatives from both counties to review the petition. It's just that the lead county will be handling the process and overseeing the procedure. And then looking last at chapter 6137, we have a couple of changes in regards to maintenance of those projects once they are approved and in place. And so I want to highlight those. We clarified there were some issues again with single county versus joint county maintenance. And so we clarified roles and responsibilities in regards to those joint projects. We made some changes to dates and deadlines as we did with the overall procedure. And we increased the maximum for landowner requested repairs, added a logjam removal easement, and required landowners to make a written request for damages. And let me go into a little more detail on those last three for you. The landowner repairs, under the old law, you could request repairs if you felt that the drainage on your portion of the improvement needed some changes, some maintenance that wasn't being done, some repairs to the structure itself. And you can still do that. You can make that request. It's called a written complaint to the engineer. And in the old law, that cost could not exceed $4,000, but we increased that significantly to $24,000 for that individual request for needed improvements and work. The engineer goes out and assesses whether that is necessary. And as long as the cost doesn't exceed $24,000, they can just do that through this separate, simpler process. And the payment would be assessed back on the owners who are benefited, but it would be in 10 semi-annual installments. The old law allowed only 4 installments to pay back that amount to make those repairs requested by the landowner. So that's one change there. Another one added a new provision for log jam removal maintenance. We did not have that adequately addressed. And many of the technical folks felt that there was a need when we're within a wooded riparian corridor trying to remove log jams from a project, that the easement needed to be increased to 25 feet outside the edge of that wooded riparian corridor. So that is a new provision that expands some of the maintenance easement needs. And then also, under the old law, there was a process that said that, actually there was no process, there was just a statement that said that landowners could request damages for crops that were harmed in the process of maintenance, but there was actually no process for doing that. So we added a process that a landowner may make a written request to the county engineer for those damages that have occurred to crops beyond that easement, that sod or seeded strip. So there is now a process to make that written request that would be reviewed by the engineer in order to determine whether damages should be awarded for the maintenance. Okay, so that was a really quick run through. I don't know if you want me to take questions right now, or I'll hand it back to you.
So yes, we'll hold the questions until the end of the session.
Okay.
I just wanted to check if Larry was ready to present on the next topic. So Larry, are you?
I just unmuted. Okay, I can bring my PowerPoint up now, I believe.
All right.
Can you see it?
You need to start your screen share first. So
Okay,
yeah, we're able to see your slides now.
Okay, good. Well, good morning, everybody, and glad to be a part of this program. Want to commend the organizers tonight and his group of technical advisors that have helped with the program in the past 30 years with the overhaul program. Wanted to make just a note quickly about what the overhaul program is about. In 1979, we created, or predecessors created, the Drainage Hall of Fame, and in honor of Virgil Overholt. And Virgil had about a 42-year career in Ohio, working with landowners all over the state to install drainage, to design drainage systems and such, and pretty much became Mr. Drainage within Ohio State over those years. In 1984, in his honor, in 1979, the Drainage Hall of Fame was established in his honor. And then in 1984, the Overholt Drainage Education and Research Program was established. In some of those early years, the funding came from ADS, from Hancor, from Spectraphysics, and I believe one or two other entities that set up the initial funding for the Overholt Drainage Education and Research Program. And so with that, we probably had over 50 years, or more than 50 years now, of drainage educational programs on an annual basis under the Overholt Drainage Education Research Program. Okay, now I'll go ahead with the PowerPoint. We got a number of studies that have been conducted in Ohio, and I'm going to highlight the main parts of those that relate to subsurface drainage. We do have results from drainage water management in Ohio as well as across the region. And we also have results for sub-irrigation yields from Ohio. And I will put together a summary of those that then Dr. Benoit can share with people after this seminar. Okay. When we talk about drainage in Ohio in modern times, we're talking about conventional subsurface drainage. And we also have the controlled drainage mode, or nowadays we call it drainage water management. And we also have sub-irrigation. So with one system in a field, dependent upon the field layout, depending upon the soil that we're working with, we have opportunity to do more than just drain the water from the soil profile. And that's where on-site inspection and evaluation needs to be taken to see what is possible if we're going to go beyond just traditional subsurface drainage. Ohio is home to two long-term studies. One was initiated by Dr. Glenn Schwab back in the 50s, and that was done in Sandusky County. And over 20 years of results came out of that study, and that was on the Toledo silty clay. And then another study got started by former agronomist Don Eckert, and that was in Wood County. And then when I came on board in 88, that was turned over and allowed me to run with that program. And several other people have worked with that through the years, and we've got 12 to 25 years of studies on that particular place in Wood County, and that's at the Northwest Research Station. Okay. From the work that Glenn did, he summarized his data, and from this slide, you can go across the top bar there. These are annual yield. This is annual average yield over the period of time that the study was conducted. And he had a surface drainage improvement, he had a subsurface drainage improvement, and then he had plots that had the combination of surface and subsurface drainage. And the yield advantage is the larger number you have under the second line under the bar, 32, 56, and 61 bushel per acre advantage over doing nothing, or the undrained case. Based on the information that's down in the bottom of the table, he had conducted a very simple cost benefit analysis and benefit to cost analysis rather. So once you can vary the interest rate, depreciation rates, look at economic life and things like that, but based on what Glenn had published in his textbook and other places, what we see is based on his study on Toledo silty clay, we can get $3.50 for every dollar we put into surface drainage on those types of conditions. And this is what his data and results are projecting. Just subsurface drainage, we can get $2.50 of benefit for every dollar. And then when you look at the combination of those two, we get $1.90 for every dollar used to invest in subsurface drainage on those types of soil conditions. Okay, I think this is one of the most widely cited yield studies that's ever been conducted. A lot of people still refer to these studies in other states and other countries. To further illustrate the ability of drainage improvement, and what I've done is taken his data and plotted it as a bar graph here. And the U is, of course, is undrained. Then we got surface, subsurface, and combination of drainage, of subsurface drainage and surface drainage. And I'm calling that, to this case, drainage intensity or intensity of improvement. And so just illustrating this, the yield advantages when you do that drainage improvement on farmland on these types of soils. Now the shaded area behind, that is the reduction in year-to-year variability in yield due to excess water, timeliness of planting, and drought conditions kind of combined. But we go from the highest amount of variability with the undrained, which is normal and which we expect. And as we improve the intensity, as we improve the water management, we get to a much lower variability in the year-to-year variability in yield. Okay, so this is strictly related to management of excess soil water. Okay. Now, we also use some of Glenn's data to illustrate the situation with oat and soybean. And what you see there with oats is in his study, in the 5 years that he actually studied oats, they had no yield on the undrained condition. But you can see again, we still have the trend of reducing year-to-year variability as we improve the management of the excess water. Okay. And again, just to summarize, for both corn and soybean, the drainage improvement, this is the benefit to cost ratio. So for each dollar invested, depending on the crop that you're working with, and depending on the assumptions that we made in doing this analysis, following what Glenn had done in his textbook, you've got these ranges of return based on $1 of input into improving the management of the excess water. Okay. Now, I mentioned that we did some work, took over some plots that were up at the Northwest branch, and we had two periods of time where we ran studies. Now, the very top table, what we've got is the number of tillage systems that we evaluated at this site. And this is from 1984 to 2009. And you can look at the drained versus undrained yield over that period of time. There's a little bit of difference in when we ran particular types of studies, tillage studies, that is. And so you can see the period of time, for instance, Ridge Till, we ran from 84 1994 to 1995. And Rich Till was not widely being accepted, so we were asked to remove that treatment. 84 to 2009 for plow, 1992 to 2009 for no-till, 96 to 2009 strip till, and 99 to 09 for zone builder. So you can see under those various treatments what the yield advantage is, and there in every case there is a yield advantage over the undrained conditions at that site, and that's a Hoytville silty clay soil at that. And the plots were slightly crowned, and so we did not completely eliminate the surface drainage component, but it was nearly done if the plots are maintained properly. Okay, I'm just checking here. Okay, now in the bottom, from 84 to 95, we just evaluated plow and ridge, and just wanted to bring out something here. And we had continuous with each crop, and we had rotation system set up. So in each year of the study, we had a rotation of corn to beans and beans to corn, and then we had continuous corn and we had continuous soybean. So you can see what the yield advantages are again. And what I wanted to point out was under the plow condition, we noted that we were actually getting a little bit of a benefit due to rotation, and that's not a whole lot of yield difference there. If you look at under plow for continuous 27.3 bushel per acre versus rotation with 28.8, so a little over a bushel and a half. But you look down at the soybean yields, and we go from 9.4 to 13 bushel per acre on average. So the rotation itself can create an yield advantage if maintained properly. So we went back and we conducted a very similar analysis to these data to what Glenn had been doing over the years. One thing to note, we didn't have the continuous corn and the rotation corn, and then the rotation beans. We didn't put the continuous soybeans in this analysis because people aren't really doing that. 25 to 27 bushel per acre advantage. And that's over a 12-year period with continuous corn. And this is combination subsurface drainage and surface drainage compared to no subsurface drainage on these particular plot conditions in Wood County, Ohio. Rotation corn, we bump up an additional 4 bushels. And then rotation soybean, we go 7 to 10. We actually had implemented no-till toward the end of that study, and that's where we get the 17. And again, these plots were set up by Don Eckert, agronomist with Ohio State University. Now, again, the benefit to cost analysis for similar type of discussion or presentation to what Glenn did. Continuous corn for every dollar you put in, 1.7 or $2 up to $2 and so forth. And so the biggest benefit came here with rotation soybean again. So good evidence that being in a rotation can slightly improve your yields in the soybean if they're in rotation, and the same with corn. Well, it's close in corn. All righty. Just looking, maybe graphically looking at the yield increase in corn under the various types of tillage systems we employed over the study, and just nice illustration of the benefit here. So just something to kind of better illustrate, other than just the plain numbers, that we are getting a yield increase when we manage these soils and we manage the excess water in these soils. Soybean, similar trends. Maybe some years are better you note that big rotation yield increase for the continuous plow condition and for the ridge till condition, which we don't, do much more anymore. Corn, again, and for the fork tillage condition tillage systems. So kind of summarizing over all of those data that we have from this particular location. Yield increase in corn due to drainage improvement, I should say, 24 to 39%. Soybean yield improvement with drainage improvement, subsurface drainage improvement, 13 to 46%. And again, bringing up the rotation effect that we feel is provided by this particular study. Okay, and just to mention a couple of other things, we didn't have enough time here to be able to go through all of the yields that we have, yield data from across the Midwest. We have a number of Midwest studies that participated in a regional project that produced yields under drainage water management or controlled drainage compared to a zone that was under just subsurface drainage. And then we also have some yields in Ohio from sub-irrigation work. Now I want to mention, going back to just conventional subsurface drainage, we have the two long-term studies in Ohio. We also have Dr. Eileen Kladivko has done quite a bit of work on a set of plots. I think it's, I forgot the county name now, but it's on Claremont soil, which is an important soil that has a lot of drainage problems and needs to be maintained as well. And I think she's got 25 years in that study, or maybe close to that. So not to just say that we've got long-term data from one state, but we do have good data through Eileen from Indiana and Purdue University. Okay, that I think wraps it up. I want to thank everybody for attending, and I'm going to make through Vinayak, I will make all of the material that I'm going to produce available, and then he can distribute to that. So contact Vinayak, and then we'll get this information to you. You can also contact me at brown.59OSU. My office number, I'm not in the office, haven't been in the office for over a year and a third. And there's my cell number. And leave a message if you don't reach me. Okay, that's got it about tonight.
All right, thank you, Larry and Peggy. We're gonna take some questions now, and there's some questions already started flowing. I'll just answer this first one just for everyone. I got a couple of questions asking about the slides and availability of the slides, and the presenters who are okay with sharing their slides will put those in a handout mode, and we're going to make a PDF available through the website here shortly, not right away, but maybe within a week from today. So you will receive a notification through the follow-up emails whenever that is available. Peggy, we had a question for you from Chester. What is the opportunity for the board to modify a petition? We frequently see petitions for tile mains for water flows that are better suited by an open ditch. Can the board make this change?
Yes, there is a couple of opportunities written through the law where the board itself can propose alternative solutions rather than what the landowner may have proposed. And there's also, so that could come within the design itself of the project. They could design something different, especially looking at costs of various approaches. So there is definitely some deference there to the technical expertise of the board and its staff in preparing the final plan that would be voted on. And even if that plan comes up and is rejected, there's an opportunity for the board to come back. If the county commissioners reject at the second hearing that proposal, the Board of Supervisors alternative plan, alternative language in a couple of different places, Chet, and I can point you to those if you want to look a little more closely at those. But yes, that opportunity is there.
Okay. So another follow-up question is on the benefits, the definition of benefits. And I see that you've started typing an answer, but I think it would be good if you address that question. So the question was, the new definition of benefits seems to no longer have any limits and therefore would be almost impossible to challenge if someone disagrees. Is this correct? And does it therefore have the potential to skew benefit cost calculation? And also, can you give an example of benefits that were not included in the previous definition that should be considered?
Well, there's a lot there in that question. And I would say that even under the old law, the definition of benefits was difficult to challenge. And that has been a source of conflict when we look at litigation, is arguing over what exactly is a benefit and how do we put numbers on benefits costs. We did discuss that quite a bit in our task force. That is, I think, just an endurance with the nature of this type of improvement and an assessment for it. But the intent when we added that language to benefits, that was not that we would make it, wide open that anything could be a benefit. The board had the discretion to look at other benefits that we may not have in the statute itself. So we'll see if that does, as suggests here. I'm sorry, I lost his name, but if he or she is suggesting that could be a benefit, I don't think that is the case. The entire body of law constrains to certain types of benefits that we're looking at: the economic benefits, the environmental benefits. So those are still there. It just gives a little more flexibility to try to address all unanticipated benefits that may itself. And then I guess the second part of that question was
examples.
Examples of benefits that were not included in the previous definition that should. I think that by adding that, not limited to, that does open the opportunity. We didn't specifically state what those would be, but to examine a little more closely some of those environmental benefits, perhaps. Water quality is certainly something that we're talking about a lot. So that would be, they would have that opportunity to examine that type of benefit now.
One more question before we switch over to Larry. So this was about the sod strips. There's two questions. I'm just going to include both of them. So how does the new drainage laws for easement and seeded and sodded strips affect ditches already in maintenance? And there was another question on does the increased width from 4 to 10 feet allow us to go back and increase the width on existing improvement projects? So the first one was on the how does that affect the ditches that are already in maintenance? And then the second part of the question is, can we have new increase the width on existing improvement projects?
Okay. Yeah, so there's been a lot of discussion about how to handle those existing projects with maintenance, because typically the law isn't retroactive in nature. We don't pass a new law and then go back and change everything according to the new law. Those previous situations are grandfathered in. But maintenance is a little bit different because it's an ongoing activity. That's one that we've grappled with quite a bit on that easement. Now, if there is going to be an increase in the maintenance easement, then it would have to be removed from, under the new law, that would have to be removed from the property tax rolls. So there's an opportunity. I don't think it would be automatic. There's an opportunity to increase that if it's necessary, I think, because if it's just for maintenance purposes, but it's not an automatic retroactive application of that new provision. So the second question, I'm sorry, what was the second one?
It was on the, so the increased width from 4 to 10 feet, does that allow us to go back and increase the width on existing improvement projects? So I'm just asking if
Right.
we can just
Yeah,
widen the
that-
ditch further.
Yeah, and that's why I'm saying it's not automatic, but I think if it's necessary to maintain, then the law would provide that opportunity to be actions taken to do that. And again,
Okay.
increase, the entire amount would have to come off the property roll.
So I'm going to take more questions. Just while we're doing that, I wanted to let people know that if you see a question that you like, if you like that question, you're essentially voting that question up. So if you like a question that someone else has asked, feel free to vote on those as well. So there was a question for Larry. What methods were used to improve surface drainage in those plots? And what criteria was used to determine that the drainage improvement actually happened over control?
Okay, I've written a brief answer, and I'll add a little bit more discussion when I produce the summary handout. For Glenn's plots, I think his plots were 100 by 50 feet in size. He had replicated plots, I believe 2 to 3 replications. I'll look that up for sure. For the undrained case, a berm was built all the way around the plot. And so all the water, if we did have runoff, that did run, would go to a catch basin where any of the runoff from any of the plots was captured. For the surface drained only plots, those were graded, I believe, to 0.5% grade, but they were graded, and they were graded toward the outlet, and there was a berm around the outside of the 3 boundaries. So, and the berm around the outlet, or around the boundary of all these plots, was basically set up so we didn't get runoff moving from off the plot into the plot. And with the subsurface drained only plots, the plots were not graded, but then the combination plots were, since we had a combination of surface and subsurface drainage. But I'll produce a little bit more information in a handout that I'll provide tonight.
Okay.
You mean to go ahead to the next question on that?
I had a follow-up question just in relation to the slides on surface, subsurface, and the combination.
Yeah.
You had the benefit cost ratio kind of went down. So the highest increase you had was with surface drainage. And I'm just trying to think if it's just because of the initial cost that the benefit cost ratio goes down as you go further into like the subsurface drainage and a combination.
Well, subsurface drainage, surface drainage improvement can be one of the most economical improvements, but we just don't have people adopting that routinely up in Northwest Ohio where these studies were conducted. But it does give you your best benefit to cost results, and because it is a cheaper type of land improvement.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
basically it, yes.
And so there's a really good question for you again. How well can we extrapolate your results to other soil types, such as Brookston silt loam, but it can be any soil type, but how well do you think these results would hold depending upon which soil you are draining?
Well, it's, we could spend millions and millions of dollars, and I think researchers would like to have had that much money to look at yield studies, long-term yield studies like this on a number of important soils in the state. Blount and Brookston are two important soils, somewhat up in Northwest Ohio as well. But what we can do and have done over the years is we use a model called DrainMod. And with DrainMod, we can input soil factors, surface drainage or surface relief kinds of indicators, and using daily rainfall and maximum temperatures, we can run a 5-year to 30 or 40 or 50-year analysis to get an idea. It doesn't predict perfectly what the yield benefit could be if we have drains at different depths and different spacings. And I will add an image of that for a couple of soils. Maybe I'll do that for Brookston or Kokomo, which we have. I think I have got results for that. I'll add those into the summary I'm going to provide Vinayak.
Okay. Thank you, Larry. We do have some more questions that remain unanswered, but in the interest of time, I'm going to hold those questions. Feel free between Larry and Peggy to answer those directly through the Q&A. But we're going to take a quick break for about 4 minutes, and we'll begin the next session sharply at 10 o'clock. And I'm going to keep some announcements on the screen while we do that. So let's take a break and we'll come back in 3 minutes. Okay, welcome back, everyone. It's 10 o'clock. I apologize, you got only 3 minutes of break after session one. So we'll try to keep things on time for the next session. This is the start of session two for the workshop, and I'm going to hand it over to the moderator for this session, Mark Sager.
Thank you very much. Can someone confirm that you can hear me?
Can hear you.
Fantastic. Okay, our first speaker today is going to be Justin McBride, and he's a professional engineer with the Ohio Department of Agriculture, Division of Soil and Water. He attained his Bachelor of Science degree from the Food Agricultural Biological Engineering Department at the Ohio State University back in 2012, and he has since been working with the Ohio Department of Ag. He works on many conservation practices from animal waste storage structures, petition drainage projects, wetland projects, waterways, those types of things. And I know that he is also on the no-till board here in Ohio. So with that, Justin, I'm going to turn it over to you, and he's going to give us an overview of the drainage design process.
All right, thanks, Mark. Let me pull up my PowerPoint here. Okay, can you confirm you can see that?
Yes, we can see that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, good morning, everyone. I have the pleasure of doing the most exciting presentation for today, of going through the engineering design process and some construction specifications for typical subsurface drainage installation and design. We'll start off by going through these three reference documents that I've used for this PowerPoint. The first two are documents created by the Ohio NRCS. The first one is their 606 practice standard. This contains all their typical design information. And then the second one is the 606 construction specification, which again is the typical construction details and requirements needed for the installation of subsurface drainage pipes. The third one is a engineering practice document created by the Society of Agricultural Engineers. And this one's less available to the public unless you purchase it or you are a member of the society. But all three of these will be referenced today. Okay, so anytime that we look at designing a certain size tile for a field, let's say, or a certain area to be drained, there's a few questions you always have to ask to figure out how big that pipe should be. The first one's going to be, how big is the area that you're going to put through that pipe? How big is your drainage area? Okay. The second one is your drainage coefficient. Now, I'm not going to talk about that here on this slide. I got a couple slides coming up where I'll get into more specifics on what that is, but that factor is measured in inches per day. The third one is the grade of the pipe main. So this is measured in feet per feet, but oftentimes when you're in the field and you're talking with a contractor, they'll say, well, that pipe's on a 10th grade or 2/10 grade. And what that means when they're talking about that is a 10th grade is simply 0.1%. And a simple conversion, if you do the equations to calculate the capacity of a pipe, is you just take that 0.1% and you divide it by 100. The fourth one is the diameter of the tile line to be used. And I'll talk about, there's some differences whether you're doing the inside diameter or the outside diameter. And then the fifth one is the type of material the pipe is actually made from. How rough is the inside of that pipe? And we'll talk about that in a little more detail coming up as well. The first two factors I mentioned are really the factors that determine the amount of flow that is required for the pipe that you're installing to carry. Okay, so it's really the controlling flow. If you're installing a new system, these are the two factors that say, okay, that pipe needs to be able to carry so much CFS. Okay. The next three are really the factors that influence the capacity of the pipe. So all three of these influence how much CFS or total flow rate can that pipe really handle out there. So for the first two, the only thing you really got to keep in mind is that if you increase your drainage area that goes through the main, obviously that increases the amount of flow that has to be carried by that main. Okay, so those are directly proportional. And the same goes with the drainage coefficient, which I'll talk about here on the next slide. If you increase that, you also have to increase the amount of flow that the pipe can carry. So as I mentioned, what's a drainage coefficient? In the equations, and I promise I'm not going to go through the equations, but just keep in mind in the equations, if you can visually picture a pool of water of the depth of 1/2 inch over an acre. Think of the amount of time it would take to drain that pool in 24 hours. That creates a flow rate, okay? That's essentially what the equations do, is they model the amount of time it would take to drain that total volume of water of an acre pool in 1/2 inch depth. But the question I always get is, does that mean that in the soil, water will only drain down 1/2 inch every single day? And no. What actually happens is that really depending on the soil type that you have, the free water that is in the soil profile, and I say free water because of the total soil volume, about 50% of the volume is solids and 50% is some sort of voids. So any water that moves into the soil has to occupy that 50% of void space. Well, that amount of water that's in the soil, a large portion of it sticks to the soil. It doesn't actually go downward via gravity drainage. So there's a small fraction that does do that, that actually moves through the soil in a downward motion to the pipe, okay? And that is where, if you have a fully saturated soil, typically a 1/2 drainage coefficient will drain the soil by about 6 to 12 inches per day, depending on, like I said, the soil type, okay? So these are tables in the 606 standard that basically are good guidelines for choosing the right drainage coefficient. You have anything from 3/8 inch coefficient for a standard mineral soil with standard field crops, which would be soybeans, corn, wheat, all the way up to 4 inches if you have specialty crops like say vegetables and fully organic soils that have a lot of open inlets. Okay, so there's all these different ranges that you can use. In general, whenever I start with any kind of drainage system, if it's a soybean, corn, wheat field, that's all they're doing, which is the vast majority of what we have out there. I like to stick with a 1/2 inch to start because that kind of covers a lot of scenarios. Most of the times we're not in organic soils. If you are, you can certainly bump it up. Most of the time we're not putting in a lot of open inlets, but if you are, of course, you can bump it up. But generally, I like to stick with that as a first starting point for any drainage coefficient that I choose for a new system. The last three that I talked about dictate the total capacity available in the pipe. Okay, so the first two gave us, okay, this is how much flow you need to have in the pipe. And then these three tell us, okay, this is how much flow that pipe can actually carry. Okay, and so similarly with the first two factors here, as the grade goes up, as the steepness increases, the flow that the pipe can carry increases as well. As the diameter, the size of the pipe gets bigger, obviously you can carry more flow in it as well. But the one that's inversely proportional here is what's called the Manning's roughening coefficient. The lower that value is, the more flow the pipe can carry. And I'll talk about that here on this slide. Each pipe material is lab tested for a smoothness factor of what they call the Manning's roughness coefficient, okay? The lower that value is, the smoother it is. And the important thing to keep in mind there is the smoother the pipe is, if everything else is the same size of the pipe and the same grade of the pipe, the smoother pipe will always carry more flow rate than the rougher pipe, okay? So if we put all of that together, what does that mean? If I assume a 1/2 inch drainage coefficient, which again is very common, if I assume a 1/10 grade slope for the pipe, which is probably the low end of what I would want to design a pipe for subsurface drainage. Anything flatter than that, and you may deal with some sedimentation issue in the pipe. So that's really the flattest grade I would go. If you take those two assumptions, you basically have two options here. You can choose a single corrugated pipe, which is they have no smooth inside. It's the corrugations inside of the pipe. There's a list of the acres that different pipe sizes will drain. And then on the other side is you have a smooth wall pipe. This could be a PE dual wall or like a PVC pipe. You can see for the same size pipe, you can drain at a 1/2 inch drainage coefficient more acres than you could in a single wall, fully corrugated pipe. Okay. So oftentimes when we do a new system, we start asking the question, okay, well, I can either put in an 18-inch rough pipe and drain 100 acres, or I can put in a 15-inch smooth wall pipe and still drain that same amount of acres. So which one do we use? Well, that's which one's more expensive, which one's more available, the amount of cover you have in the pipe comes into play. But there are some of these choices you can make when you start with a new fully designed system for each field. If you attend the Overholt Drainage School in person, we have in classes where we sit you down for several days and we actually go through the whole Manning's equations and design guides and all this stuff. And you'll get to learn those very well. But there are other methods of figuring this stuff out, okay? Most tile companies like this one here produces some sort of a slide rule where you can simply slide it and you say, okay, I want a 1/2 inch drainage coefficient, figured out the amount of acres that I want to drain, and then I can look down and see which pipes at what grades will be able to support that needed flow rate. Okay, so there's many options out there. You have apps on phones that can do this, computer programs. We have a set of drainage design charts through NRCS as well. So there's many different opportunities for that. Okay, I'm going to switch over quickly here to the installation guidelines. The key thing here is if you go through the whole Overholt class, it's about a week long. We can teach you how to do a really good design on any system, any field, anywhere. Okay, but that's only half the story. You still have to get out there and someone's got to properly install that system to the design. Okay, and there are some things that can kind of dictate whether you turn a good design into a poor overall system or a good overall system. First one I want to talk about is the trench width and depth minimums. And I'm talking about typically when you excavate or you put in a plow as well. You generally want about 6 inches outside of the pipe, and that's the outside diameter. Now I talked about pipe when I say a 6-inch pipe that's typically the inside diameter. 6 inches is the inside diameter. There's a difference between pipe and tubing. Pipe is normally measured from the inside diameter. Tubing is typically from the outside diameter, but just understand that every time that we talk about subsurface drainage pipe, if it's 6 inches, 8 inches, 10 inches, whatever, we're talking about the inside diameter. So the outside diameter is going to be a little bit bigger than that. So a 6-inch pipe may actually be 8 inches outside to outside. So when we install those in a trench, we want to make sure we have at least that width of 8 inches plus another 6 inches. And what that allows is us to get good backfill, friable material, bedding material, sort of around the pipe and on the bottom haunch zones and get it filled in there good so we don't have extreme settlement as we go through. The other important thing is the minimum cover on a pipe is always 2 feet in standard clay-based, silt-based soils. Okay, if you're anything in those range, which is the vast majority of Ohio, you always want 2 feet of cover of dirt above the pipe. That's from the top of the pipe to the above ground elevation, 2 feet total. If you're in some organic soils, you bump that up to 3 feet, but in general, you always want 2 feet unless you take special measures, which I'll talk about here in a second. Now the trench width and depth maximums, these can be a little bit trickier to understand, but basically the wider a trench is, the more pressure that puts on the pipe from the new friable settlement of the new material, if it's talking just dirt, of course. So generally that they like to keep the trench width right beside the pipe to be pretty narrow. 6 inches to 12 inches is pretty good. Anything bigger than that and you're adding extra pressure and extra force on that pipe, which this is not a rigid pipe. Typically we're dealing with plastic tubing. It can be crushed. So try to keep that trench as narrow as possible, but still enough to put enough friable material on both sides of it. And typically, anytime you're installing pipe deeper than 6 feet in the ground, you generally want to call your pipe manufacturer and just ask them, say, hey, if I'm going 7, 8 foot deep because I have to cut through a hill, you know, is there special things I have to do to support that pipe? Okay, each one's going to have some different recommendations, but just keep that in mind. Anytime you're deeper than 6 feet, you want to talk to them just to try to figure it out. As you put pipe in the ground, there is some requirements that you want to have some sort of groove that pipe will fit in fully undisturbed dirt. So when you dig a trench, you want to have the undisturbed dirt on the bottom, but you want to put a groove that pipe can sit in. These 3 options here can be the 90-degree triangular groove, the fully trapezoidal groove, and these circular groove. But basically, depending on the size of the pipe, you'll choose one or the other. The thing to keep in mind is that this groove needs to be deep enough so that it can fully support the pipe. And you can see the one dimension on the right there is 0.35 times the outside radius of the pipe. And again, a 6-inch pipe typically has an outside dimension of 8 inches. So 4-inch radius for the outside radius is going to be about 1.5 inches deep into the ground. Is that the groove needed to get down there, basically. If you're installing with an excavator and you're unable to keep a constant grade on the ground, which it's pretty tough to do that, generally we recommend backfilling with some gravel up to about halfway up the pipe. You put about 3 inches of gravel underneath the pipe, and you put it on both sides up to about halfway to the pipe. That fully supports that pipe, and it prevents any uneven settlement underneath there. Typically it's number 57 stone, but you can do it with a number 9 stone as well. And then beyond that, you just want to make sure you backfill with good, friable, loose dirt that will fully encase that pipe as you backfill. Okay. If you do this detail, typically you can get away with just down to 1 foot of cover above the top of the pipe. So remember I said 2 foot of cover minimum, unless you do special things out there to support that pipe, which this would be the one case where you could do that. And any main that we put in is normally going to have an outlet, unless of course it goes into a much larger main, but eventually it will outlet somewhere into a ditch or something like that. The one thing to keep in mind is that you always want to protect from any kind of erosion that might occur. This pipe is going to be elevated from the ditch bottom by about 1 foot, and that's to keep any sedimentation that occurs in the ditch from plugging the pipe, of course. But because you have a foot fall, there's going to be some amount of energy that drops from the pipe. And if you don't have that protected with some sort of stone, you can cause some severe blast erosion, basically, as it goes through there. The other thing is on your outlet pipe, you always want to have a non-perforated pipe to where about 2/3 of that pipe length is in the ground, so that you don't have any outside water movement outside the pipe and sort of causing any outside of erosion that pipe could fail. Okay. Then the last thing I wanted to touch on was when you're backfilling open trenches. So when you backed in there and you're digging a connection or something like that with a backhoe, once that pipe is laid in the groove, of course, just make sure when you're backfilling with loose dirt that you backfill by hand or some method to where you can get nice, good, loose, small particle, friable material that can fit around the pipe and over the top of the pipe. The last thing you want to do is drop a big, large dirt clod on the thing and just crush that pipe. So just be protective when you're backfilling like that. If you're using a plow, obviously you don't have to worry about it because it's all underground. But anytime you make an open connection with a backhoe, just be very sort of careful of installation, that you're not sort of causing it to fail or anything like that. So that's all I had. I will wait for questions until the second presentation, and I guess I'll turn it back over to you, Mark.
Great. Thank you very much, Justin. Our next speaker is Bob Clark, and Bob serves as the president of Clark Farm Drainage, a third-generation family-owned business with a diverse portfolio, including drainage work. He has a Bachelor of Science in Engineering Technology. Bob is a former U.S. Army paratrooper, He's a national president of Land Improvement Contractors of America. He serves on the board for the Agricultural Drainage Management Coalition, on the EPA Ag Training Committee, and as an advisor to the Transforming Drainage Project at Purdue University. In 2016, Leica Magazine named him National Entrepreneur of the Year. Bob is going to give us an installation overview of safety standards and good practices. Bob, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mark. Can you
Yes.
hear me?
I can hear you. You're good to go.
Okay. All right. I don't know if you can see me or not because I'm a little bit technically challenged. But anyway, I want to thank you, Mark, for the introduction. And I was just listening to Justin's presentation, and I realized that we may have a little overlap, so I'm going to kind of deviate from my plan just a tad. Let's talk about safety first, and the safety is basically regulated by OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Administration. And if you're on a excavation site, a construction site, you have to wear PPE, personal protective equipment. And if you're on an excavation site with an backhoe or a excavator, you need to wear that includes a hard hat, because it's just all it takes is a little dirt clod, one of these compact little dirt clods coming out of the bucket at 10, 15 feet to hit somebody in the head to potentially hurt them very seriously. So the first thing we want to do is make sure you have your proper personal protective equipment, which is usually a hard hat and a high vis upper outer garment. And why do we want that? Because we want to be seen. We've got dozers and excavators and big trenching machines or plows that are moving across the field, and you do not want to camouflage yourself in that kind of environment. So, and right now the days are really long, but if you live in the northern latitudes, it could be dark at the start of your workday. It's 8 o'clock in the morning. It could be nearly dark at 4:30 in the afternoon in the winter months. So personal protective equipment is very important part of the safety of being safe on a job site. Another really important thing about being safe on a construction site with open trenches is having a competent person. A competent person must be designated by the company, and a competent person is competent in the excavation and the trench safety on a job site. And that means he's probably, or she has probably taken some trench safety, some OSHA trench safety, and has some sort of training on how to properly and safely manage a construction site. So it's important to have PPE, a company designated competent person in charge of that site. And the other thing that's really important about safety is that all the crew needs to know, every person needs to know they have what we call stop work authority, which means if you as a laborer think, hey, I'm in way over my head and I don't see this thing being properly side slope or benched out, you have the authority given by the company to stop work because you don't think it's safe. And you go see your competent person, which typically is the foreman, and you talk about what you think your issue is. So PPE, stop work authority is very important on safety. Another thing that the competent person does on an excavation or construction site or a subsurface irrigation project, subsurface drainage project, is you fill out what they call a JSA or a JHA, job safety analysis, or a job hazard analysis. And basically what that is you talk about the activities that you're going to be doing that day, which typically is installing pipe, plowing in pipe, making connections, and identify the risks that are associated with it. Because if you're plowing in pipe every 20 or 30 feet, you've got a lot of moving equipment in a very close proximity. And it's really important that you try to talk to the crew and have your competent person identify those risks and how to mitigate them. Whether, we're going to go from left to right, we're working this way because of the angle of the dig out, we're going to, everybody will always be in sight. There's always something to do that allows you to, some technique that the competent person will review with the crew to mitigate the risk associated with the activities at the job site. And that job safety analysis also, is a recorded document. And typically you can use a mobile app to allow your foreman or your competent person, which typically is a foreman, to log in who's there, make them sign for it, and you can establish your record and get your daily JSA performed. So 3 big things about safety, 2 big things so far: personal protective equipment, designated competent person, everybody has work stop authority on a job site, and then you fill out make sure you got your paperwork documented. So that's safety in a nutshell. And it's really important that, part of that competent person knows once an excavated trench is deeper, gets the depth greater than 5 feet, you need to start using these practices, whether you're benching, sloping, or shoring, to ensure that the trench is safe for people to go down and work on and make the connections. Typically in farm drainage, the laterals, the connections are not that deep, but there are cases when you're in a hill and you've got you access your tile, and the depths are greater than 5 feet. And it's important that everybody is properly trained on how to mitigate the risk of these deeper trenches. It's very, very important. And that's I would say all I wanted to talk about as far as safety. PPE, your daily JSAs, everyone's got work stop authority, competent person. Then the other thing I was going to talk about, standards. The standard practice for subsurface irrigation of corrugated polyethylene pipe for agricultural drainage and water table control. That standard, that's ASTM standard F449-02. It's got a bunch of terminology in there, and I don't want to read it, but I do think there are a few things I'd like to talk about that I think are very important. And I think Justin kind of alluded to them earlier in his presentation. One of the things I'd like to talk about is backfill and bedding. Basically on a subsurface drainage project or a subsurface construction site, we're using native soils. It's very important that you properly, so you're going to bed with native soil and you're going to backfill with native soil. Now, if you get, sometimes we've got the capability to install some larger pipe and go deeper than 6 feet, or you might be able to trench in 8 feet. We typically can trench pipe in at depths of 7 to 8 feet, and then you have to those situations if either working for the county surveyor, he's going to have some sort of plan. If the pipe is installed with at a depth greater than this, you need to stone it to the top of the pipe or to the spring line. So you always want to make sure you're following either the guidance from the county surveyor, or if you have a question, reach out to your manufacturer for additional guidance. But basically 95% of the time, your backfill and your bedding are native soils. And it's that's very typical. And one of the really important parts to a subsurface drainage project is your boot. And your boot serves as a couple functions. It's what gets your pipe, above ground to the bottom of the trench, on grade, in the groove, or in the contoured bottom, trapezoidal, 90-degree V, or kind of like the rounded bottom that's specified in some of Justin's pictures. And you need to do that typically with or without, most of the time without any envelope. Sometimes there's there's a couple different types of envelopes that may or may not be required for your project. Typically, if you're in like muck soil, you might need, or a silty soil, you might need a synthetic envelope, something that a sock that's going over the pipe. So it's very important that when you install this pipe, that you maintain the integrity of your sock. So if you're going through there, that means your boot, when it goes through the chute, has to be kind of smooth, and that way you don't, because once it's down underground and bedded and backfilled, you can't see it. So you want to make sure you don't damage your sock during the installation process. Occasionally, sometimes you'll be asked to put like a stone envelope around it, or some sort of aggregate envelope around it, based on if you're in some kind of non-cohesive soil where there's a lot of where the water movement's pretty high and there's always a lot of silt in there. They may require on these larger diameter mains an aggregate envelope to filter out silt and or sand. So it depends, but those are kind of the exceptions. They're not very common, but they do happen occasionally. I don't want to talk too much about that, but it's just something you need to be mindful of. Another thing I want to talk about is tension, pipe stretch, especially in the summer months when the temperatures are warmer and the actual pipe temperature is warmer. It's a little more pliable. It's a little more malleable. You can stretch it a little easier. And the best method that I know to combat pipe stretch is power feeder. Power feeder, it basically takes those tension forces out of play. Especially if you have like an onboard reel, because you got a reel puller in conjunction with a power feeder, the pipe never touches the ground. It comes right off the roll, right into the boot, right out of the back of the boot and the bottom of the ground. And it's basically tension free. What the trick is, when you string pipe and you lay it along a field and you don't have a power feeder and it's hot and you might be, and there's corn stubble or something, you're catching on some pipe, that can acerbate the stretch issue. So power feeders are a very powerful tool to mitigate the tension forces during installation. Another thing that's really important is the backfill. We talked a little bit about backfill, and the groove is put in the bottom of the trench with these trenching machines, your plows, your wheel machines, your chain trenchers. You can put those 90-degree grooves in the bottom of the trench pretty easily, or that rounded bottom in the bottom of the trench. Once pipe diameters get above 8 inch, basically you want a rounded bottom trench that is 1 inch plus or minus one, plus only the radius plus 1 inch, or the diameter plus 2 inch. That's your rounded bottom, your the bottom contour of the trench. The other really important thing, it's hard to maintain that, is at the start hole. The start hole is dug with an excavator or a backhoe typically, and that 10 or 15 feet or 12 feet or 8 feet or whatever it is the most. That in my opinion is where there is the greatest potential for deformation or damage to the pipe. When you do it, you can be out in the certain parts of the field and your native backfill just crumbs off real nice and easy, or you're in an area that's been, you're on an end road, there's been a bunch of, wagons through there. This is where they load and unload their crop, and it's in the summer and it's like concrete, and it's almost impossible to get good bedding or good backfill on that pipe good bedding on the pipe before you backfill it. One of the things that we do that I think helps minimize that risk is we actually put a little groove on the bucket tooth to where we have more of the, typically 4-inch laterals, you make a little, a half circle, and you put a little groove in that starter hole to give it that cradle, to give it that additional support, and then you carefully bed it with the native soil. The other thing that we do that I think is really important is called what we call a rolling backfill. Typically, the dirt, your starter hole is excavated, and as you move away from the point of connection, the way your bucket moves, there's naturally a little ramp to where you finish your dig stroke. Well, when you set your machine in and you take off, that ramp is still there. So after you set the pipe in the groove, carefully backfilled it, carefully bedded, excuse me, the next step you want to do is you want to start your backfill process at the point furthest away from your connection. That way, as you push your dirt in to the trench, it falls in and hits this incline, and we get what we call a rolling backfill. So the material that's been excavated for the starter hole doesn't come directly onto the bedded material. It kind of gets to roll down that ramp, and that ramp kind of keeps moving toward the connection, the point of connection as you backfill it. Those couple things really help mitigate the potential risk of damaging the pipe at the start hole. The other thing that I think I want to talk about here for just a few minutes is the tree roots. Tree roots, and it's in the code here. You know, they're basically there's a few things that, you know, all outlet pipes should have animal guards on them. You don't want a raccoon, you know, crawling up your pipe, getting down there to where it sizes down to a 6-inch. Next thing you know, it can't turn around. It'll die in that thing. It'll blow up and it'll make a little mess for a while. And I've actually seen that happen a couple times. So always put animal guards on your outlet pipes. And the other thing is the tree roots. You know, typically in my neck of the woods here in Indiana, a lot of the open ditches are not very are somewhat maintained, but there's typically a lot of times if you do get to, you know, dip a ditch, they'll make you keep the trees on one side and they'll let you take it out the other. But typically, you never know. Sometimes your outlet pipes are in an area where you've got trees nearby, so you always have to take extra precaution. Use your non-perforated pipe and make a tape connection, you know, at the outlet pipe, so you can do whatever you can to keep the tree roots out of the pipe. And I like what the specification is for the F449 specification for tree roots is basically if you've got water-loving trees, which are like cottonwoods, willow trees, elms, you need to maintain that between the perforated pipe and that tree 100 feet. So you cannot have an outlet pipe or a tile with perforations with 100 feet of those trees, or they have the potential to grow in. They're water seekers. They'll find the water, they'll grow in there, they'll plug it up, and they'll just cause you a lot of heartache when your customers call on you complaining about the tile being backed up. Now there's the other kind of trees, the fruit, the nuts, and the other hardwoods. They recommend a 50-foot distance. So in a nutshell, you know, outlet pipes and trees are beautiful, but tree roots can compromise the hydraulic capacity of your tile main. And so it's very important to try to use the proper precautions to keep the tree roots out of the trees. And I think that is most of what I wanted to share in the time I had allowed to share it. One other thing is there's the ASTM F44902 is a great resource. You can Google it online. You can read all the terminology. I don't think you wanted to hear me read it. It just didn't seem appropriate. Another excellent source for information is your pipe supplier. They should be able to give you installation guidance. You know, if you're laying you're doing a large diameter main, some sort of smooth wall pipe, max depth of bury, you know, the contoured bottom. There's a host of information. So when in doubt, reach out to your supplier. And I think my time is just about up.
Yes, you did great. Both you and Justin right on time. We appreciate it. So we do have a couple of questions here. Let me pull these up. First one's going to be for, well, I guess either one of you. The question is, what is the definition of a mineral and organic soils?
So Larry or Vinayak, you guys can correct me, but typically when I think of it, I think of anything over 20% organic material. But the other issue you've got is sometimes you can get into organic soils where the first few inches are organic soils, and then beneath that is some sort of a silty clay or some other stiff material. So just keep in mind, whatever soil type you're in, it may or may not be an organic soil that goes all the way down to the tile. Okay. But generally 20% is what I've always said. Maybe there's a different number for you guys, but that was my take.
All right, thank you. The next question is, this one says for Justin, it said you start with a 1/2 inch drainage coefficient in your design. How do you know which drainage coefficient is the best choice in terms of giving the highest benefit cost ratio?
So if you wanted the best benefit, you choose the highest drainage coefficient, which is 4 inches. But you ask the best benefit to cost ratio, which of course is not the case. Obviously, that's going to depend on what kind of crop you have, and the cost of the materials. Okay, so if failure mode in corn and soybeans takes 24 to 48 hours for that to fail, and it doesn't fail completely, then you don't necessarily need that 4 inch drainage coefficient capacity, which is much greater than a 1/2 inch, obviously. But if you have specialty crops that can cost a fortune to put in and to grow, and then if it fails, cost a really big fortune, you want to kind of protect that with a little bit higher of a drainage coefficient. So it changes for every type of scenario, but in general, the way those coefficients were originally put together is they did the research to determine the amount of yield benefits based on potential failures throughout the years. And generally 3/8 inch to a 1/2 inch is pretty good for a mineral soil, non-organic soil with really not too many open inlets coming into it. Anytime you put an open inlet into a system, you just increase the amount of capacity needed. And especially if you did not limit that inlet from flow, it can pressurize that pipe. So you typically want to be careful with inlets and make sure that you either up the drainage coefficient or you go through a full engineering design of the open inlet to where that you're not pressurizing that pipe. But I'll let Larry talk about the drainage coefficient history if he's got that ready to go.
Let me pull that out of my pocket. I did want to make one comment real quick. Any information you need, whether you have mineral or organic soils, go to your web soil survey, and you can get site-specific information from the soil maps that are done for your farm, and it'll tell you. You can then look that up to see if they're organic or not. I don't know that we classify the A horizon as being organic on some mineral soils, and as a general rule of thumb. But if you do have an organic soil that does go to the depth or beyond the depth of tile, you need to consider a few other factors versus what you would do in a mineral soil. I think both you guys did a really good presentation, and that's all. On the drainage coefficient, I know the person who asked that question, and I'm going to ask him if he could write up a summary of how he would do that himself. He's one of our grads from Ohio State, and he's at some other other university in the Midwest, and hopefully he can answer that for us. Hassan.
Right, Larry. Hey, Bob, I have a question for you. It says Justin, but I think you'd probably be better for this one. It says, what are the key performance measures to look into so one can compare different good drainage improvement design options, or how to reasonably arrive at what is an optimum drainage improvement design for a farm? How can we measure the benefits of that optimum drainage improvement design before selecting and installing it? You're still muted, Bob, if you're trying to answer.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, there you go.
Okay, that's a great question. I don't know if I have enough information to answer it. What's the cropping? Is it row crop? I mean, there's a lot of different, we need to gather a little bit more information, but I don't, there's a lot of tools online. We can talk about drainage coefficient, and well, first off, in my opinion, there's a couple things. You need surface drainage and subsurface drainage. If you got this little ponding area, you're either gonna try to shove it down that pipe, or you can just cut a little surface drain. I mean, like on a 10th grade, just to get it to flow off the field, the sheet flow, Well, let's get it to flow off the field, not try to jam up the pipe with the water. The second one is, now that you've got these, all these guys have got these links where you can go to you can put the weighted KSAT average. You can punch in your parameters, your drainage coefficient. It'll give you some sort of spacing. Problem is sometimes you got 3 or 4 different soils on the farm. You got the weighted average with the weight of the soil. So there's not exactly I don't think a perfect answer, but what you do is you try to look at all the different soil types, the different KSATs, the weighted averages, the drainage. You try to match the drainage intensity with the drainage coefficient, and it can be done pretty quickly, but you don't, until you know what soils you're on and what the goals are for the grower and what the crops are planting. If you're somewhere and a guy's planting sweet potatoes and he's losing a third of his crop because he can't get them harvested in the fall, and he might not even be in the corn belt, you might think that, then you have to look at his cost per acre. He's losing his revenue. I don't know what the revenue per acre is, but it could be sizable. There's just a ton of different things to think about. Too long an answer, sorry.
So on that, Mark, I'll add to it. Each year in the Overholt School, we do a class design project of the same field. We do it every year, and every single team has a different design every single year. We haven't seen the same design yet. And so which one is the best? All of them worked. All of them were good designs. Some were better than others. And so it becomes a matter of what's the cheapest option if you go off a 3/8 coefficient or 1/2 inch coefficient versus what's the best for draining the field, both uniformly and across the entire field. So oftentimes those two aren't the same. So the cheapest is usually the one that has the shortest main with the longest laterals, the least amount of connections. Okay. But generally what that means is those laterals are going to cut through hills and kind of be deeper or maybe shallower than you'd like them to be. So that may not be the best design. The best design is probably going to be one that keeps those 4-inch laterals at relatively the same depth, at about 2.5 feet below the ground, all the way across the field that go to the main. And obviously, if you can limit the amount of connections, the better, because typically that's where failure modes occur, like Bob had mentioned earlier. But oftentimes that's generally what we like to see. So that was my 2 cents.
All right, thank you guys. Next question. I assume I'm going to send this one to Bob. It says, do you have a opinion on virgin versus recycled plastic for tile?
Wow. Yes, I do. Well, I listen to the Water Table podcast. I don't know if everybody does, but I highly recommend it. Anyway, they had a guy, they talked about this on their podcast. And the fact is there's about 1 billion pounds of plastic used for these kind of products, not just drainage tubing, but storm drains, all this other. 60% of it's recycled. So 60% of the market is recycled. And as a steward-minded contractor, I just think it's a great way to repurpose a waste product. So I'm fully supportive of it. And I actually think, the way that they can test and at these places that these manufacturers who use this product, this recycled product, I think they can make a pipe that meets every metric every other pipe manufacturer meets. So I'm a big fan of using being a good steward, I guess is what I'm saying.
All right. Thank you, Bob. I think we have time for one more question, and we'll have to take a break, and we'll try to answer the rest of the questions online. The next question, again, is for Bob. It says, do we have a reliable in-field decision aid to determine the need for an envelope?
That I don't think I have the answer. That might be a better Justin question. Basically where we live in Indiana, we don't have a lot of silty soils. It's a loamy clay. And we don't need a lot of envelope, whether that be a synthetic filter, but you can move into different parts of the country where those characteristics of the soil change, and you get enough of that silt content, then all of a sudden you need that filter. And I don't know where that threshold is. Maybe Justin would be able to answer that one.
All right, Justin, you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, if I can unmute myself, there we go. Yeah, so generally, if you have a soil type that is prone to siltation, it's going to be in an area that they're aware of that because they've had issues in the past. Okay, if they have fixes that have worked in the area, you want to kind of go with that because every soil type that's prone to siltation is going to be different than the next throughout this. Well, first of all, this state and throughout the country. So generally the local best practices that address that are going to be your first choice. But if it's an area that you've not done this kind of work before, typically watch out for the very fine sands. Anytime you have what we call water bearing very fine sands, which are very fine sands over top some sort of limiting soil layer to where the water comes down and saturates those sands. Those are almost silt size sands, large silt, small sands. Those are the ones that are really prone to moving into the soil. And you have to be careful using the socks on those cases because those will actually get in there and plug the sock. So in those specific cases, and again, I can't tell you exactly what to look for other than you just have to talk to people that are out there. Soil scientists might be able to help you with NRCS. But if you do run into those, generally that's where we're going to talk about the sandstone envelope to separate those particles. And the one thing I did mention before is anytime we bed with stone or sand, you always want to make sure it's what we call a poorly graded material, which means that the particles of sand that you're using are all about the same size. The particles of the stone that you're using are all about the same size. If you don't have that, you can have compaction and that can really plug and basically stop your drainage as well. So 2 things to keep out.
All right. Thank you,
Can I
guys.
We have time for, I mention a couple of things here, Mark.
Nope, we're all got time. I got to move. I got another
Okay.
speaker to come in here.
I got you.
Bob, I
Go
got
ahead.
one more question on the question and answer. If you could answer that one by typing, I'd appreciate it. And I'm going to turn it back over to Vinayak. Sound good? Thank you,
Thank you,
gentlemen.
Mark. And Larry, I think the session 3 is also going to be very, we're going to just continue this conversation in session 3. So we'll make sure you get to make a note so you don't forget what you wanted to share. We're at the end of session 2. I just want to take a quick detour before we go out on a break. John Matthews from Ohio EPA is here online. And he had a quick announcement, maybe a couple minutes before you go on break, he wanted to share with you. So I'll hand it over to John. And then right after he finishes, or even before, you feel free to take break, and we'll come back at 11 a.m. for our session 3.
All right. Thank you, everybody. My name is John Matthews. I've worked for Ohio EPA and ODNR for the last 25 years, and I'm the non-point source manager for Ohio EPA and also the stormwater manager. But I want to bring up an opportunity to participate in a funding proposal that we're going to be preparing this summer. So the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative puts out grant proposals every year usually, and we're going to put together at least 2 of these this year, and we may help local folks put one together in order to add beneficial additions to channelized systems in the Lake Erie Basin. So if you have sort of a ditch that's in the headwater areas, the upper part of the watershed, it's probably small enough that you wouldn't have to do a lot of earthwork in order to add a 2-stage channel to that. This would pay for the extra cost of doing that. Or if it's maybe the benefit of adding some retention or saturated buffers. There are a lot of other practices that you could add to get the water quality benefits. Specifically, we're kind of drawing attention to the 2-stage channel, and what's the cost of doing maintenance? Well, then go a little bit further. This would pay for the cost of doing a 2-stage channel on that. So the benefit is that you'd add storage to that. You'd also add the nutrient removal benefits, and you also lengthen your maintenance between the times that you have to get in and clean out the channel. So, and maintaining tile outlets in a clear functioning status. So my email is john.matthews, that's Matthews with 1 T, at epa.ohio.gov. So you're welcome to send me or Rick Wilson an email or if you just look up Ohio EPA and John Matthews, you'll find me. So I just wanted to announce that and look forward to probably reaching out to some county drainage engineers and maintenance staff. So thank you.
Thank you, John. And now we are officially on break. We'll come back at 11. Again, here is the contact information for John and Rick. I will include this in the handout that you will receive after the event. So anyone who wants to contact them, feel free. All right. Thank you again, and we'll come back at 11. All right, it's 11 o'clock. Welcome back, everyone, to the beginning of session 3. And before we start the session, you probably saw this screen for the QR code to get your CCA credits in. We're assuming you're, even if you scan the QR code, you're still going to stay with us for 1 more hour. So the session that will follow will be included as part of your credit. We just wanted to give an opportunity to folks, whoever could, to get the QR code scanned. And we will display this QR code again at the end of the event. So there are, if you do not have the ability to scan the QR code, I would like you to note down this link, and it's the same link that you found the event at. You should be able to get your CCA credits in using a link on that website. And of course, you always have the option to self-report. Just a note that if you go back to the recording to complete the viewing of this event, you have until July 8th, about a month from now, to get all your CCA credits, to claim the CCA credit for this particular event. With that, we're going to transition to session 3 that starts right now. I would request the panelists who are on the speaker panel to turn on their videos if they can. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to the moderator for this session, Paul Chester. Paul, maybe you can start maybe introducing yourself and then go into the session.
Thank you very much, Vinayak. Hopefully you can hear me at this point in time. I'm Paul Chester. I'm a retired engineer, semi-retired consulting engineer, ag engineer. I've retired from NRCS after 30 years of retirement. I've taught the Overholt Drainage School for over 25 years, and thus my connection to our conference today. I'm going to have Vinayak, and I'm also going to have Bruce Clevenger helping me with questions for the question and answer session today for our panelists. We have a pretty good panel of folks on our panel. We have Greg Wells, engineer with NRCS. Bob Clark is going to be back with us. Rick Galehouse, a contractor, a LICA member. Steve Girton, contractor. Dave Schwederman, contractor. Jeff Billenstein, contractor. Nate Cook with Cook AGPS. And we'll also have Mark Sager and Justin McBride, both engineers with ODA, with us today also. Bob and Justin have already had a little time to talk about some of their interests at this point in time. So in starting off the panelist session, we're going to give some of the other folks on the panel a little bit of time to briefly introduce themselves and possibly make a comment of their interest at this point in time. So let's start off with Greg Wells. Greg is the area engineer for NRCS in Southern Ohio. He's now the acting state engineer at this point in time. So Greg, go ahead and start it off.
Sure, Paul. Thank you. I'm happy to be here today. Happy to give a little perspective on NRCS's role in drainage. NRCS is your federal agency that has a lot of involvement in drainage. In most cases, we're cohabitated with your local soil and water district and oftentimes help them if they're involved in drainage projects. But the greater role that USDA now has in drainage not only includes water quality practices that can be attached to these drainage systems, as well as the USDA role in protecting wetlands and the value that they provide to the environment as well. So my history, I've been with NRCS for 19 years, both in Northeast Ohio in our Medina area office, and now in Chillicothe, South Central Ohio for Area 5. And as Paul said, I'm acting state engineer for now for NRCS, so kind of have some of the role in overseeing NRCS's engineering policy, and of course drainage plays a part in that. So thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you, Greg. We'll move on, and next we'll have Rick Galehouse. Rick is a contractor with Galehouse Drainage out of Doylestown, up in northeastern Ohio. Rick is also the historian for OLICA. And Rick, if you would pop in and give us a little information on what you have.
Yeah, some of the history of OLICA. OLICA started as a contractors organization. Can you hear me?
Yes, we're good.
From in 1949, the group of contractors decided to form an association. And they got together and had meetings, field days. The two pictures you see over here are from a field day they had in 1954, where they're installing clay tile using a plow. So it's not a new idea. In 1953, Overholt School started with Virgil Overholt, as Larry said, the father of drainage in Ohio. My dad Fred Galehouse was one of the first ones to attend that school, and he made notes on the evaluation form, and they said, well, can you come back and help us next year and solve that problem? And so he did, and helped ever since then. And Ohio contractors have helped ever since. I've helped since '72. So, and in 1956, the Ohio Drainage Contractors, which was the original association, ODCA, joined the Land Improvement Contractors, the LICA. They didn't become OLICA until 1966. So, and there's, if you wanted more information on the LICA, you can go to the OLICA National, and it's www.licanational.com. And you can, from there, go to any state that's available. So that's about all I have for now.
All right, thank you very much, Rick. Next up, we have Dave Schwederman. Dave is with Cy Schwederman Incorporated, partner in West Central Ohio. So Dave, you have any comments?
I kind of reiterate what Bob Clark said. This installation really needs to be addressed. Plastic tubing is just too easy to put in. I have a few pictures here where definitely it's either the plastic collapsed or it was poor installation. So it needs to be addressed and really adhered to as far as the drainage practices. So.
All right, thank you, Dave. Next up, we have Jeffrey Billenstein. Jeffrey.
Doesn't look like Jeffrey has joined us today.
Jeffrey is not able to make it. Okay, we'll move on then to Nate Cook. Nate is with Cook AGPS and software programming. Nate.
Yep. Good morning. Next slide shows a little bit of my background, and my dad helped develop the GPS software back with the computer controlled replacement for laser grade. So my background started with that early on, and been doing the GPS type stuff ever since that. What the software does is allows you to survey the ground, and it creates the drainage profile for each line and kind of creates a best fit to keep that optimum depth and keep that pipe in the nice area depth wise. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the best practices as far as the technology goes. So this is all using RTK GPS. So the base station really is a more crucial piece of this puzzle than everyone realizes. The base really needs to be out in open area of the field and not have any trucks or equipment or anything metal parked near it. And it needs to be extended up, so it's got some height off the ground just for radio distance and range. And there's often questions about using tower base stations that are miles away. And the answer is usually that's not as ideal for the elevation work required for adequate drainage install. And next slide, I have a couple pictures of some mistakes that have been made over time. So the base station does need to be kind of farther away from where you're going to be working, just as a safety issue. So that is a base that has been run over by the tile plow just because it was in the area that was being worked and the operator didn't see it or whatever. And then the lower picture is, someone using the base just left it near the truck because it was convenient. But again, the signals can bounce off the metal and make your signal wander more, and that's not ideal. And then, okay. Next slide is a picture about the point of the plow. There was good discussion earlier about how to properly have the right shape at the bottom underneath the pipe as the plow is going through, but the point of the plow is also an important part of how it's going to grade through the ground. The GPS technology and the computer can do its best to try to keep it installing on grade, but if there are problems with the point, it's not going to follow and plow through and make that groove the way it's supposed to. So this picture is basically just they thought the point was good, but closer inspection, it was actually cracked and broken. So your point does need to be checked regularly for wear, and it does need to be
Is anyone able to hear Nate?
No, unfortunately, it appears that Nate is frozen up at this point in time.
Okay, we can come back to Nate if we are not able to hear him. Maybe we can go with Steve.
All right. Let's move on then to, I guess, Mark. Do Mark or Justin have any additional comments at this point in time versus where we're at, and any other comments? All right, I'll assume that means that they have no comments at this point in time. We'll start off with, we have a question from Matt Wallace. When is solid pipe such as HDPE better than dual wall or corrugated? I assume that he is also talking about solid pipe versus perforated pipe. Dave, would you have any response to that?
As far as the when to use single wall to dual wall?
Yes, that and or solid versus perforated.
Well, solid needs to be put in any kind of wooded areas. If you're running next to trying to get an outlet through a wetland or something that you got permission to go through, anything that's watertight. As far as dual wall, you have a lot more strength and a lot more capacity. So a lot of times it's into your design of your program. With the flex pipe coming out, it just seems to have so much more capacity and strength when you're out there installing it and after the fact and everything is finished. So.
All right, thank you very much. And also on the dual wall versus a single wall, you have an expense factor to get in there. I guess I left out contractor Steve Girton on the panel also. Steve, do you have any comments that you'd like to add at this point in time?
The only comment, and that's what I'll agree with Dave and what Bob was talking about, was as far as on the installation process of making sure, number one, on your point, that's maintained, and also the groove. It's very important to have a supporting factor of that groove in the bottom of your trench to help support that pipe. It's very critical that you try to maintain that. You'll get a lot more better life far as your drainage system and your pipe to just make the whole thing work that much better.
Thank you very much, Steve, for that comment. I've seen that concern myself quite often. It's very easy to pull that backhoe out without any means for making a groove or something in there to support that pipe. And so that's a good point. Next question, I guess, is there a loss of wall strength with perforation over dual wall? Anybody? Bob, would you care to comment on that? Do you know of that answer?
I do not know of that answer, but I can tell you that, you know, there's the old, you know, foot test, or you just pick the roll up with the simple is just picking the roll up in the tile car. We just picked up a roll of 8-inch flexible dual wall just last week. And I got to tell you, it is a much different roll than 8-inch single wall. So I don't know how that deflection test goes with those two things, but just by the sheer weight per foot, it looks like it ought to be a lot stronger, a lot stiffer pipe, but I don't know the actual particulars. You know, you'd have to, and I don't even know, like, if my vendor could actually, you know, would share that with me, but just from like, just the way you can hear the strain of the motor picking up the pipe, you know, it's heavier than the single wall.
All right, Mark, would you care to help comment on that also as to perforation versus perforated versus non-perforated strength of the pipe?
I guess I would think that as long as the manufacturers are manufacturing it correctly, the strength should still be there. Really comes back down to the backfill of the haunches and the you know, the groove that's installed, or if it's too deep, you know, or backfilling it with stone. I think most of the installation problems where something collapses is because of the backfill. We didn't get the backfill in there correctly. So I wouldn't think, normally it's not the pipe. I very few times we see that it's actually the pipe material or the strength because of perforations. It's because of the backfill going in.
All right, thank you very much. I guess I have a few questions of my own I want to throw out there to each of the panelists at this point in time, especially the contractors. What type of equipment are you using at this point in time, and what technology have you added to that for grade control? And Steve, maybe we can start with you.
Okay, yeah, well, we have 2 drainage plows along with the chain trencher. We've been using AGPS software as our machine control and how we implement or put our pipe in. Like I say, we're very, very fortunate to have a good working relationship with Nate Cook. And if we have any questions at all, why we just give him a call and he'll help us walk through any GPS type problems. But and then also, I mean, this also dates clear back when I first started helping. We was running nothing but using targets and doing everything manually. And then after we took over, that's when we made the implementation of using laser as our machine control. And then as we move forward with GPS, so the technology has just evolved that much more, and has been real gratifying for us that we can get a lot more work done and accomplished, and with far better accuracy.
Dave, what kind of equipment do you have?
We have basically mostly plows. Most of our work is done with drainage plows, but we do have some wheel machines, large diameter wheel machines. Any kind of excavating equipment that is needed to do conservation work, scraper pans and stuff like that. We pretty much have GPS on everything with a laser backup, just when you get tight to woods and stuff. They just recently upgraded. Normally don't even need laser close to woods anymore with once you upgrade to more satellites and everything else. Everything come through Nate, like Nate does an excellent job. And anytime we do we basically plow everything in. We do not dig starter holes unless we need the depth on it. And if we do dig starter holes, we put gravel on everything. Anything that's dug with a backhoe, just because there's too many issues with the pipe collapsing.
All right, Bob, what type of equipment do you have?
Well, we have 2 plows and a chain machine. And the chain machine, basically, for our larger pipe, for our deeper cuts, we use the chain machine, and the plows for everything else that we can possibly put in, from like 15-inch to, down to the laterals. We use unfortunately, I think I'm the first one here to not use Nate, but we use Trimble, and the Trimble is has not changed much, but Trimble is kind of in a lot of different markets, and they were looking at a package that would give us 3D, not just the linear grade control stuff, but waterways, ponds. You can put it on your dozer, you put it on your excavator, you can, with the plow. So, I mean, this technology is not stopping. It's just going to move forward. So, we kind of don't want to get too far behind, but there's always something new. And I do think there's, we're talking a lot about these start holes, and I think it's probably because it is a big deal. This over excavated starter hole is a big challenge, because if you don't have stone, you cannot properly bring that thing back up to grade and think it's going to stay there, especially if you got some super saturated soil. So if you do use this technology that you can put on the excavators, and you kind of basically set your bucket out there, as I understand it, right there where you want to start your stroke, and you say, punch in a grade, and you say, that's my benchmark with this slope, it will not let you over excavate it, which is under dig it. I think those are huge steps that everybody should try to do. Or about that video.
All right, Rick.
I got a rubber tired chain machine. Now, I'm still using a laser, but I'm not in the tabletop flat country out in like Western Ohio. Mine's a little more rolling, so there's a lot of times I just use what's called a slope control on the machine that signals me what attitude the shoe is at, and I'm just going uphill.
All right, thank you.
One of the things I wanted to add about blinding, my theory is you don't drop anything on the pipe that you wouldn't drop on your foot first.
All right, thank you for that comment. Steve and Dave, you both had some slides up there showing some, I'll say, damaged tile of some sort. Dave, what were those situations?
The 15-inch, that's the 8-inch. The 8-inch is where we did a job back in 1997. Ran the 8-inch in with a spiker wheel machine, and we got up to the fence row, raised the machine out, dug the rest up to the fence row with a backhoe up to the neighbor's fence. And we did not put gravel around it. Early this spring, the farmer called me up. We went back there, dug it up, and it was like 20 to 25 feet of this pipe looking at in this condition, up to where the coupler was, where the wheel machine was installed it. So where there was the groove and everything, it was good. Anything that we dug with the backhoe was pretty much quartered and barely hanging together. The 15-inch dual wall pipe, we was asked to dig up some pipe that had a lot of holes starting. And once we had about 6 foot of cover on it, we dug it up and we cut this section of pipe out. And presently we got it, it was a 15-inch. We went back and quoted it, said it probably should take a 24. For some reason it collapsed. The bottom portion is rounded, so I'm thinking there was probably some decent bedding and maybe the material collapsed. I don't know, or the material failed. The whole line was looking like this and was basically full of mud, barely running water through it.
Thank you. Steve, comments on your tile?
The ones that we found was, this was installed back in 1990. It was on a job site that we was investigating the main, and we found this 10-inch single wall pipe where it was developing cracks, through the side walls and the sides, the top, the bottom. Also, we found that we ran a camera through it to determine if it was just a single area or what the situation was, but we found it to be true, not just in one spot, but a lot of that portion of that main that was put in was deteriorated or cracking, as well as some of the pictures that I sent was, and they tell me this was prior to them having tap tees where they had stuck the 4-inch tile inside the 10-inch pipe. And some of the pictures that was there, it was sticking through, I want to say 4 inches, which in my mind is way too far to have any type of obstructions for the flow. But they say it was, they told me it was before they had tap tees available. But nevertheless, this is some of the things that we found on different job sites that we was able to see or visualize by running a camera through the outlet, through the main, to investigate the condition of it.
All right, thank you very much. We have a question in now. How is pricing done by drainage contractor? Is pricing for a particular drainage improvement designed for a farm arrived at by evaluating the expected economic benefit attributed to their service to the buyer? Bob, I'll let you take that one on first. You have try that one out.
Okay, well, thank you very much. That's not how we do it. No, we do an assessment. We look at the field, the soil, the whatever they want, the drainage coefficient, the spacing we think is right, and then we come up with an estimated cost. And basically, at that point, it's just kind of a lump sum number. So that's how we kind of get the ball started.
Dave, any comments on that?
Oh, we usually keep costs of all our jobs, and we just set pricing, and we look at the job. Each job's a little different. Some has scalping to do, size of the tile, and everything is priced per foot normally.
But basically, you folks are coming up with a cost for the installation, et cetera, and not necessarily evaluating the overall benefit of the project. Hopefully, they know that or understand that they will have a benefit. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Another question. Has anyone had any problems with large clay vertical slabs sliding down the trench behind the boot and partially crushing the pipe as you plow in large pipe 10-inch or bigger? And what do you think can be done about it? Any contractors had that situation at all?
We have not had any situations to what you just described or mentioned. Years ago, we installed a lot of clay big mains where they did slide down, where we hand set them down in the and had a slide how we installed them. But yeah, we haven't had any issues like what you just described.
Typically, if you're going to be plowing it in, you're going to probably push that stuff off to the side anyhow. At least you do with rocks. We haven't really had any issues that we have noticed or been called back to come and investigate.
We have never been called back on a, if I understand the question correctly, about a clay piece damaging a bigger piece we plowed in or trenched in. I don't think we've ever had been called back that I know of, not to my knowledge.
All right, thank you. We have Isan back again with another question. What soils need knitted sock wrapped pipes? Have you found any sock opening clogging in these soils? Have any of you gentlemen and contractors had any experience with putting socks on pipe?
We usually don't put too much of it in. It's very minimal if we do. And it's usually on very small jobs, or maybe it was required by some commercial job. That'd be about it. The only thing I can think you could have it in is maybe some sandy soils.
If I could comment, why we have used a little bit of the stock material. Like Dave mentioned, we used it where we had, it was a real sandier soil type. It was almost like a fluid type sand that we would put the sock or use the sock on the pipe. And that helped maintain as far as getting all that sand right directly into the tile lines. But most of our soil types in my area are all pretty well clay based, and we don't have that much of that type of a sand. But when we do have it, we do use the sock, but it's kind of at a minimal use.
Rick or Bob?
I've had some iron ochre plug the filter fabric, and typically the solution to fix iron ochre problems is to flush the pipe, and if you have a sock on it, you can't hardly get to the right spot to flush it, and so they don't use much of it.
Oh, we don't use a lot of sock, but sometimes you get into maybe some certain projects with a lot of muck soils. We might use a muck pipe with a sock on it. Then you got iron ochre issues too, sometimes with those soils. But mostly around where I work, mostly the time it's no sock. And what we do to mitigate any kind of risk with those occasional layers or lenses of fine sands or whatever, we just use fine slop perf pretty much all the time.
Mark, have you had any experience with any of your clients using socks?
I have not. I think that most of the time, even when we get into the sands, we're looking at knife slots or something, just because we don't want to. We want to avoid the sock plugging with anything. So I think if we get into sands, we'll look at a knife slot, or if we get into a real silty fluid material, we're putting in probably solid pipe through that section. So.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. Next question, how important is compaction of soil above the spring line on HDPE installed in a spoon trench? This is being backfilled with ML and CL soils. Vinayak, would you like to take that question on?
I think maybe Larry could address it. You may need to unmute, Larry.
Well, how important is compaction of soil above what's the spring line? Tell me what that is again.
Halfway in the tile.
What, say that again?
Halfway up the tile.
Okay. I don't know that I can really answer it other than the fact that after installation, I've seen some situations where after installation, they got on the site a little bit too quick and compacted the soil, which they feel like had minimized the effectiveness of the new subsurface drain. I guess heavily compacted fields, they probably need to have something done to them before or after new drainage is installed, just to remediate that compacted layer. But usually we're talking about compaction that's above the pipe depth. In a lot of cases, it would be really extreme if the compaction was down at tile depth or below. That would have been an extreme compaction situation. I saw Rick shaking his head. Rick?
Yeah, I've never seen any problem with compaction of the immediately above the tile. Usually the problem is it's not compacted enough above the tile. The plastic tubing gets its support from having support all the way around it. And if you don't have the support on the sides, then the top can collapse. But I haven't seen anything with compaction above the tile.
Hey, Ivan, could you let me know what state you're in? Because it sounds like you are from a different state, which may have a lot more problems with some of the things we're talking about, or may not. I don't know. I guess Paul would go to the next question.
Okay. Also, is most HDPE pipe, dual wall pipe being installed with spoon trench in Ohio? I guess I'm not clear exactly what a spoon trench is. Is somebody on the panel aware of what that description is? And is class 1 or compact class 2 backfill being specified for most district tile mains? Anybody have an answer on that, Mark or Justin?
Well, I'm not exactly sure what he means by spoon trench, but if it's in ag drainage or field drainage, it's almost always native backfill material. The times that we'll get into where we're using stone bedding is if we're in a less than 2 feet of cover, or we're going to have heavy loads over that area for whatever reason. It's a drive or whatever it is. But in the field itself, we're trying to keep it into native backfill material, unless we're going really deep and the manufacturers suggest that we have stone backfill up to the spring line or maybe over the top of the pipe. So those would be our situations where we're not using just native backfill material.
All right, thank you. Next question. How many contractors in Ohio are using perforated dual wall pipe for private installations over 8 feet of buried depth? Second question to that, and up to what size tile are they running through your plow? So I'll let Bob start that one off.
Well, Paul, thank you. But, you know, I can't speak for all those Ohio contractors on the panel. I don't want to, but
Well,
you know,
you're only a few mile away in the same terrain. So we'll let you comment on Ohio. Okay.
Well, I could just speak from what we've done here and around here. We plow in, you know, anywhere from the laterals, you know, 3 or 4 inch laterals all the way up to 15 inch. We plowed in the 15-inch flex, 15-inch dual wall. But you know, it's really more of a function of like, you know, I don't know how, you know, I've heard all these great, my plow won't plow in 15-inch real deep. So if we're going to put in a 15-inch, it requires some depth, like 6-7 foot cut. We're just probably going to trench it in. It's just easier, you know. And I think we do a better job of getting a better bottom with the plow than we do the trencher, because the trencher doesn't, we can configure the bottom of the trench with plow specifically for that particular, like 15-inch pipe, where we put in 15 and 18 on the same trench, and basically we don't quite have the exact same shape, but we have a finely milled backfill to backfill it with that native soil's been kind of crumbed up very well with the wheel machine, just like it would the chain machine, or the chain machine, just like it would wheel. And it goes back to that point where you stop using one machine and you go back to the excavator or the backhoe, and you know, you just don't get the same material. It's native soil, but it's in a different state, and it doesn't backfill as well.
Rick, your thoughts?
You talking, did you say me?
I said Rick, but Dave, go ahead.
Oh, we plow in up to 12-inch. We just plowed some 12-inch in the other day. Depth, anything that's over 5 feet, 5.5 foot deep with a plow, you pretty much got to scalp a little bit of the hill off and pre-rip it a few times. But usually when it's that deep, we just bring our wheel trencher in and put it in with the wheel trencher.
Rick?
I personally haven't used any of the flexible dual wall pipe yet, but if I get over 6 foot of cut, I'll take the top, dig a trench to run the machine in, and so the machine is only digging 5.5 foot deep, and do the installation that way.
Steve, any thoughts to add to them?
Pretty much the same thing. I mean, we can plow in as far as flexible dual wall. We have plowed it up to 12-inch. Anything larger than that, we trench in. We've been using more and more flexible dual wall pipe for our mains. We haven't used anything as far as 4-inch, as far as in a dual wall situation, but our mains, 6s, 8s, 10s, 12s, 15s, we've been using a lot of flexible dual wall and doing more and more all the time with trenching and plowing our mains in using dual wall.
All right. Question to Steve. What camera did you use to inspect the tile?
Well, our camera system, I had it built from a gentleman who was doing that type of thing. So it's not a brand or a type of system. I don't know if you can see it. I do have it here on my desk. I'll try to pick it up here, but it's a robotic camera that we can run down through the tile line, and we have like 500 feet of cable that we can pull down through there, and so it does a nice job to you know, camera or video a tile line.
Vinayak, do you have anything you want to add to that?
On the cameras?
On the cameras.
No, not to my knowledge. I think I wonder if Nate knows of any products that are available. I know that there are tile cameras that you can purchase. I think Justin or Nate may be able to comment on that.
Yeah, my dad has one from General is the brand on it, General Pipe Viewers or something like that. And yeah, it's basically a camera on the end of a wire that you have to feed down, and then it's Wi-Fi enabled where you view the camera on your smartphone kind of thing.
I guess to add to that, Dave, or are you guys using a tile locator, electronic tile locator, where you're running the cable up the tile, or have a camera yourself, Steve or Dave? I mean, Dave.
Yes, we got locate rods we push through the tile, and then locate it with a regular locating wand like the telephone companies use. We have a push type camera. If we got a large diameter tile, 10, 12 inch or bigger, then we just usually hire somebody to come in with a tracker and do it. He'll just run through it and track whatever he can, and those cameras can got the head on it where it can turn any which way, look up laterals and stuff like that. So small type around houses, we just use a little push camera. It's got maybe 300-400 foot of line on it, and if a tile gets too big, you can't push it. And if you get any kind of sludge in it, you usually can't see it. So it's usually not too long of a distance that you can use it.
I know on our cameras on our camera that we got here, I had it, like I said, I had them build it for me, but we could go to work and there's an extra wire that's built into the system to where after we run the camera up through the tile main, we can hook our locator up to it, and we're able to trace that wire And the same way is, let's just say, if you had something that happened to your camera, you'd be able to hook your locator and find where it's at, to where you could dig it up, and you'd be able to come within 2-3 feet of where the camera head in itself is located. So that's kind of been a beneficial factor too.
All right, thank you. We'll go on to the next question. What do contractors typically do for a warranty or a guarantee? A handshake, written agreement? What do you have out there, gentlemen? Bob, start with you.
Great question, Paul. You know, a lot of our work is repeat business. And, you know, you're going to do a pattern tile system. You know, you're going to eventually, routinely have a few leakers along the way, and we'll probably fix, a few. Now we have certain situations where we have a contract, and then we can kind of negotiate that in the contract. But we basically warranty our work. I don't know if we have a timeline. In the contract's kind of evolving document, so it could have been 5 years, 3 years. If you do a work for like a county main or something, usually it's a 1-year warranty. But if I got a customer that's been with us for a long time and he's got something that happened and didn't show up for 10 years, or I'm sure, or a pipe collapsed or something, whatever, or tree roots, we try to, if it's something that we can fix it, just kind of maintain the relationship, we'll do it. But, it kind of varies, but generally a couple of years, I would say is minimum.
Dave, what kind of contract do you usually have?
It basically on our quotes, it just says we will not guarantee the material, we will guarantee our workmanship. And if somebody calls up, we usually go out there and try and fix it for them and take care of it, because like Bob said, most of your customers are repeat and you want to keep them. So
all right, Steve, same.
Yeah, about the same thing. I mean, we don't have a written warranty that we give to a customer. Like Dave and Bob mentioned, most of all of our work are repeat customers. They know the type of work that we do. If a problem does arise or come up, we'll go back and we'll take care of it. And they know that, as far as with the repeat work that we've done for them in the past. So we don't have any written type warranty or anything of that nature.
All right.
While we're talking about warranties, I think I just wanted to maybe expand this question to Nate as well, in terms of the advanced technology that's coming in. Does that change the equation a bit at all? Or when you're working with contractors, how does the warranty and things like that affect?
I have had questions before of people that have been dragged into a court case involving the installation, and the GPS does record the tile as you're putting it in. So you do have an elevation recording of the entire length of the pipe, but keep in mind that is at the point of the plow where it's being guided, and in certain soil conditions, if the back of the boot is not where it's supposed to be, if it's bumped high or low, then that's not really represented in the recording either. But as far as generally, you can catch, grade problems or things like that. If they bump a rock, it does show up in that recording, as well as just having the GPS position is often important too, just to be able to go back and locate them.
All right, thank you. I guess that leads us to a question, gentlemen, on contractors mostly in, do you check, or how do you verify the tile installation that you've put in? How do you check the grade line that you have there? Do you check it, or do you just use your GPS criteria, the printout that you've got the grade online where you want to be?
Well, I'll start with that, I guess, Paul, but Yeah, well, first thing, if there's a question that comes up from a customer talking about grade, yeah, we can go back and look at our GPS information and see what that shows us. But then we've also, if a question comes up, we want to try to satisfy the customer. So we'll go out and we'll physically set our laser up, and we can take a tile probe and maybe shoot that main for you know, a couple 100 feet, 300-400 feet, whatever the case would happen to be, to resolve that question. If they're, you know, questioning the grade of it, you could check it. Now, that's something that is done, I want to say, very few times. It's not it's not a big problem.
Steve, or I mean, Dave?
Yes, I would say the same thing. I mean, we usually don't get too many callbacks unless you put a receiver there and you got 6 inches of water sitting in it. Or if you put a receiver or something up by the road and there's water boiling out of it, then you check the grade, you camera the tile. Pretty much the same way it's warranty work. You just you check it out for your customers and try to do it right if there's something wrong with it. But normally we don't check grade too often. We check our laser transmitters, try to do it every rainy days, go out there and double check them, make sure they're all in alignment, and hope the satellites are still spinning around in the sky.
All right, thank you. Maybe we'll go with a couple more questions. Retrofitting seems today that we're getting a lot of systems where we're going back in and splitting old tile systems, et cetera. How often or how do you retrofit into an old system? Do you keep the old tile? Do you throw away the old system? What's happening out there? Back to you, Bob, on that.
Thank you, Paul. If I could I wanted to follow up on this grade thing because I think it's a great question. Because, you know, we did a little study with Jim Fauci and Trimble, and we know that our boot, with that floating boot, we track the tip, but we don't know if the tip is actually on grade with the laser. We just check those two variables for correlation. But part of my presentation was about standards, and I've got the F449-02 ASTM standard for grade, and it says vertical deviation of more than 1/10 of a foot in 10 feet is allowable. So if that's a lot of deviation in 10 feet. Anything more than that is unacceptable. So basically, I think there should be some sort of plus or minus 1/10 on the deviation, because I think there is some deviation on the grade. But you know, according to the ASTM spec, you're allowed a little bit, and a 1/10 and 10 foot is a lot, if you ask me. But it is interesting that nobody, I don't think, to my knowledge, has, because we kind of run with it like a we don't have it like a certification program in the United States and in the Midwest, in Indiana, Ohio. They do in Canada and certain provinces, but you know, I don't know if anybody's ever checked it. This is a short answer. I don't think anybody ever has. I mean, if I'm wrong, somebody can tell me, but I've never heard about it. But it is interesting that you talk about that. And Nate was so right about, you know, you can track your tip and it'll record your as-built, but your attitude, where your boots sit, where the pile goes to the ground, you know, that thing's kind of a mystery sometimes. And the only thing, and you know it's wrong when you see you got 5 inches of water on the pipe's got 3/10 grade, like, why is this, you know, sitting half full of water or something? So the grade in this, I'm totally for the GPS, but I would be really interested if someone, you know, would compare GPS installation and then set it up with a laser receiver behind it where you could actually compare the two. To my knowledge, maybe it's been done, Nate, by your dad or something. I don't know anything about it. But I got off on a tangent, sorry.
I guess I'll insert in there a little bit. Larry, are you still around? I know that you've done some testing along that line. Would you care to comment on that in response to Bob?
Well, I'll try. I'm not the expert, Bob. I have a lot of respect for Bob. and Jim Faust, who worked with Bob on that test run. I think y'all were looking at every 10 feet. Is that right? See, with the GeoStar system, we had the GeoStar system on the machine, and on the boot rather, right over the direct at the outlet of the boot, but up in the air. And we were running the machine with a laser, so we were getting laser data, and we had that, and we also got the GeoStar data. And the GeoStar, at the one we used that Trimble provided, was every 3 feet we'd get a point. And so we did that, and Jim knows that. And we just felt like it was pretty good, but with that, we were getting an elevation of the boot. The elevation of the boot. We weren't getting necessarily the elevation of the point, but that's what the GPS was managing. I mean, the laser was managing that. So I think that the point, I believe, was raised about how well are you going to grade, and I think the 10% was not. It's 1/10 of a foot allowable in 449 in 10 feet, and that may sound like a lot. It is a lot, but if it gets much larger than that, you may get half the pipe diameter, and that comes into play with being able to pass water and sediment laden flow. So that's the best I can do off the top of my head there.
All right. Well, I think we're coming close to the end of our time. I guess for any of our contractors or panelists out there, do you have any final comments or statements you'd like to throw out to our audience at this point in time? Any thoughts or comments there at all?
Well, the other thing that comes to my mind at first is if you go out and you're looking at a job site for a customer, I think it's very important, first of all, you do a good develop a good topo map, find out what your elevation differences are, your contour lines, and then design your systems accordingly. Design your systems to where you don't have, real deep cuts in your laterals. Try to keep more uniform of your depths of your tile, 4-inch tiles or your laterals. And I know that one thing that we always do is after we do our topo, we talk to the customer, we find out some of their practices or farming practices. We look at the soils maps and determine, what is needed.
All right, thank you. Any other comment or anything from anybody?
Yeah, the original question earlier about the retrofitting an old system and what can be done or not kind of got off on a tangent, but I just wanted to say on that the biggest factor is going to be the proper main sizing. If the system is only designed to put in a couple laterals here and there, and then you want to come back and pattern tile it, the limiting factor is going to be the capacity of the main. So planning for the main capacity, not just for what you want to do now, but maybe in the future, is an important thing to consider.
All right, thank you. Well, I think that's a good session of questions and answers. Thank you for your comments. I'm sure that's raised a few more questions from some folks, et cetera. But at this point in time, I think I'll turn it back over to Vinayak and let him sum things up.
All right, thank you, Paul. Yeah, I wish we had allocated more time. This was really good discussion, and I hate to see that it's the time that's limiting our conversation now. But I hope we can continue this dialogue through any future events that we may organize. An excellent opportunity for you to actually discuss all of these things in really detail is the overhaul drainage school. So definitely make it a point, if you can, to consider attending drainage school here. We did not organize a school probably for the first time in last 30 years because of COVID restrictions this year, but we definitely plan on coming back and organizing and maybe taking the school at least a step further. I wanted to thank all the speakers and panelists for really helping us put together this excellent session, and Apologies to Nate. I know that you kind of cut off in the middle of your presentation, but just wanted to take a moment to thank the whole team that's behind organizing today's session. We have an advisory committee that we work with, and Ohio LICA has been very supportive of this event and has always been supportive of the drainage school. And also want to thank our representatives from the Ohio Department of Ag and NRCS. So with that, I think just a couple things before we wrap up is, again, just a reminder, we will have the recording available and you will get an email with the recording. If you're going to be asking for CCA credits, make sure you go to our website or scan that QR code within a month from now. Again, drainage school for next year is coming up. It will be very likely somewhere in Northwest Ohio. And as I said, we're hoping to add some advanced training options like the GPS and the drainage design software. So be looking out for the website. The link that I have provided here, it will probably take you to the same event right now, but we'll have some updates soon. I would appreciate if all of you can, or at least some of you can provide some feedback on the event that we organized today. This will really help us plan for our future events and maybe make them better and try to cater to the needs that you all may have. I know that there are a lot of questions that remained unanswered, and I am gonna save all these questions, but I would highly encourage you to reach out to the individual speakers or panelists for your questions. We will provide the contact information for these speakers through through our event website. So be looking out for the website. Someone just remind me if I am missing on any point, but if not, I'm gonna leave you with this screen for a couple minutes before we actually close the webinar, so that you have opportunity to scan in your QR codes. And I'll wait at least 30 seconds to 1 minute for anyone who may have some comments. Okay, well, thank you. Special thanks to all the moderators and panelists again, and hope you all have a good rest of the week. Thanks for joining today.